Hello all, welcome to yet another live session of Narayana IAS Academy. As all of you know, this is Sureka Bhaskar presenting to you the daily news analysis, and we have actually come up with a number of topics which have been mapped and taken up from both the Hindu as well as the Indian Express that become extremely important and relevant for the UPSC CSE examination. So before we actually move on to look at the topics that we've actually picked up for discussing today, let us actually start with our daily dose of motivation. So the motivation for today that I'm actually going to bring to you is that the main thing is to make history and not to write it. Very interesting, isn't it? So what does this actually mean? It actually says or deems it your responsibility that you need to actively participate in shaping the events around you rather than merely documenting them. So that is what is important, and for this to happen you need what to say action versus the observation. You need to have leadership skill, you need to have vision, aspiration, consistency, hard work, and so on. So this is what is actually meant by this particular motivation. So we need consistency and hard work in order to actually achieve our aspiration and vision to become a bureaucrat. So this actually applies for you as well as me. So with this takeaway, let's actually move forward to look at the various courses and initiatives we from Narayana IAS Academy has actually brought forward in order to ease your preparation for the UPSC CSE examination. So we have our 1-year prelims cum mains integrated course for the 2026 examination, and we have a 2-year prelims cum mains integrated course for the 2027 examination. We also have a total instruction hours of around 1000 hours, where 800 hours is actually dedicated for your GS as well as your quantitative aptitude, that is your CSAT. And then you have a 200 separate hours of dedicated modules of current affairs, which will actually help you link your current with that of your statics and will help you to ace any kind of question from any dimensions in current affairs in your mains examination as well as your prelims. Then we will actually provide you with a strategic micro schedule. This is nothing but a dedicated or a curated schedule that has actually been put in thought by our R&D team, and we actually come up with this particular day-to-day schedule, which actually will help you ease your confusion on getting lost in the ocean of the UPSC syllabus. Moving forward, we also have the expert faculty in every domain who have enough of expertise and experience in teaching, as well as they have actually appeared to the interview stage of the examination as well. And then we have regular testing as well as a feedback mechanism where we provide you tailored feedback based on the performance of your test series or based on your performance of answer writing, etc. Now moving forward, we provide you the study materials, that is we provide you with 12 Navigator NCERT books as well as 21 GS Navigator books, which are updated and which have been given to you after enough curation and research by our R&D team. Also, we have categorically categorized the PYQs of both the prelims and mains thematically. And moving forward, we also have digital resources where we have 250 model answers that have been handwritten by the experts who have appeared for the interview stage of the examination. And finally, we have the monthly I'm sorry for that. So we also have the monthly Navigator magazine, which actually is nothing but a one-step solution or a one-stop solution for you for your comprehensive current affairs. Okay. Yeah, let's actually continue. Please excuse me for my sore throat. So now we will be looking into the number of topics that we have picked up for discussion today. So the first article has been picked up from page number 11 of the Hindu that talks about IT Ministry has notified draft rules on data protection law. So here we'll be discussing about what is data protection first of all. Okay, so what do you mean by data protection? Why is data protection required? And what are the challenges India actually face in implementing the regulatory frameworks that are in place like the IT Act, then the Digital Data Protection Act of 2023. So, what are the challenges that India faces, and what are the global examples as per which India shall actually, get the inspiration from in order to properly implement these particular, regulatory frameworks. So here, basically, we'll be discussing about what is this particular topic of data protection and what are the new draft rules. Moving forward, the second article has been picked up from page number 8 of the Hindu, water valves. Okay, so recently the Center Groundwater Board has actually come up with the observations, okay, with respect to that of the state of groundwater report across different states in India. So here they have actually found that predominantly almost half of the states or half of the districts of India, that is out of the total 774 districts, around half of them, that is 350 of them, are massively affected by excessive presence of nitrates in them, because of which there is a syndrome that is called as the blue baby syndrome. So here we'll be discussing about this particular syndrome as well as the state of groundwater across different states. Now moving forward, the third article has been picked up from page number 1 of the Hindu. The ministry monitors HMPV outbreak in China. So here we'll be discussing about this particular virus. Okay. So what is this particular virus? What are actually the causes of the spread of this virus? What is the treatment, the prevention, etc.? We will be looking into this, and which is the nodal agency to take care in case of the outbreak in India. Now moving forward, the last article has been picked up from page number 8 of the Hindu, India cross-border insolvency as well as legal reform. So here we'll first of all understand about what is the difference between insolvency and bankruptcy, and then we'll be looking into what has been the state of legal framework which actually protects or deals with these kind of insolvencies in India since the colonial period to post-independence until the the IBC code of 2016, etc., will be taken care of over here. Now let's move forward in order to in order to take up the first topic. Yeah, so first topic for today is IT Ministry notifies draft rules on data protection law and seeks feedback by Feb 18th. Okay, so here, as I already told you, we'll be discussing about the personal data protection. So what do you mean by data protection and why data protection is actually required? And what are the legal frameworks in India with respect to data protection, and then what are the challenges, and what are the global examples from which India can draw inspiration. So this is what we'll be discussing in this article. So as you can actually see here, we'll be discussing about the DPDP Act also. Okay, this is Digital Data Protection Act of 2023, and this becomes important for both your prelims and particularly the mains examination because it deals with data protection and privacy, fundamental rights, and it falls under government policies and intervention and also transparency and accountability. Now, let us actually move forward. So, if you see, there has been a previous year question, that is in 2024, we've also covered this in the Navigator magazine. In 2024, there was a mains question on the context and the salient features of this particular DPDP Act of 2023. So, all these kind of draft regulations and the notifications and all these changes that are actually made or amendments to the provisions of a particular act, it replaces which act of the past. All this becomes very, very important for your examination. Now, moving forward, let's see why this particular article is in news. So, the government has recently released the draft Digital Data Protection Rules of 2025, and these rules have been released as a part of or under the Digital Personal Data Protection Act of 2023, and they are actually asking for public feedback of this particular draft rules, okay, by Feb 18. However, this date is not important. So, now let's quickly understand different aspects of data protection. So first you need to know some of the basic tenets or definitions of what do you mean by data, what do you mean by data protection, what are the key elements of data protection, etc. All these are very, very easy and it's easily understandable. So what do you mean by data? It is nothing but collection of facts or figures which can be used for a specific purpose. For example, if the government actually wants to give subsidies to a particular group, how are the beneficiaries identified? It is based on the data, okay, or the figures that actually is collected by means of survey like NSSO, okay, all these things, or consumption expenditure survey, etc. So this is what is called as data. What do you mean by data protection? It is nothing but the system or the processes that is actually involved in order to secure, okay, the data, okay, with respect to that of privacy, with respect to that of availability, as well as the integrity of data. So how safe you maintain the repository of data you have is called as data protection. So there are key elements of data protection. One is actually confidentiality. What do you mean by confidentiality? That is particular data, or all the data can actually be retrieved only by the authorized authorities. So authorized operators only can actually take this data, and that too they must have appropriate credentials, okay. So they actually have to be authorized to collect your data. So this is the meaning of confidentiality. The next one is integrity. That is, all the data which is actually stored with a particular organization must be reliable, must be precise, and also not be subject to any kind of unadjusted or unjustified changes. So this is what is called as integrity. Next one, availability. The data which is stored has to be available, right, and it has to be very safe and readily available whenever it is actually required, majorly by the government for all the dispersal of the subsidies, as well as these direct benefit transfers to identify the beneficiaries who are part of the poverty line, etc. Okay, so this is what it is. Now moving forward, now we will see what are types of data. One is actually personal data. Next one is non-personal data. It's very easy to understand, right? So what do you mean by personal data? This actually consists of explicit information about your own personal traits or characteristics. Okay, like for example, what is your name, what is your age, your gender, etc. Okay, and also your biometrics and other genetic details. Biometric means your iris scan as well as your thumbprints. All these are your personal data. Example, all the Aadhaar card information, these are personal data. Whereas your non-personal data is nothing but it actually does not contain any kind of these personal identified information. Okay, so this is nothing but it is no individual or a living person can be identified by looking at this particular data. For example, if there is a survey, okay, NSSO survey, or you can say household consumption expenditure survey, on looking at this, will they be able to find out me as an individual person? No, right? So they won't know my name, age, etc. It is actually a very, very generalized outcome, okay, collection of data. That is, they'll say in urban areas, in a particular house, in a monthly expenditure for the food and the non-food items was this much percentage, through which they will actually not use my biometrics, my sexual orientation, age, gender. All this is actually not found out. So that is non-personal data. Now moving forward, what do you mean? I mean, what are the different types of personal data? That itself is very sensitive personal data, which actually talks about which caste you belong to, which religion you actually follow, what are your preferences with respect to this political activity, all those things. These are the personal, that is sensitive personal data. Next one is critical personal data, where the government has actually specified certain criteria or certain kind of data which can be processed only in India as critical personal data. So these are different types of data, that is personal, non-personal, and in personal also we have very, very sensitive as well as critical data. Now let us see what is the need for such data to be protected in India. First one, that there are a lot of technological advancements, right? There's a lot of digitization which is happening in order to create inclusivity, in order to actually increase the digital literacy, to create awareness, etc., right? And also you can see the payments, the banking transactions all have actually become digitized. You have the UPI, digital public infrastructure, all these things are there, right? So what happens is there are around 800 million internet users, and this is actually the second largest online market. Okay, so India is the second largest online market, followed by China. So first is China, followed by India you have. So there are 800 million internet users, and there are also increased digital transactions, and the volume of sensitive data that is actually shared online is more. So data protection is very, very important in order to safeguard the privacy of the citizens. Next one, there are growing cyber security threats, because if you see as of 2022, there have been around 14 lakh cyber security incidents, which has actually seen a 38% rise since 2021. So because of this, how this is actually happening, because of data breaches of very sensitive information that are stored in Aadhaar, your PAN, etc. So this is why we need data protection. Also, if you see, this digital economy actually, what to say, it contributes around 8% to India's GDP, and it is expected to reach around 1 trillion by 2025. And also because it actually has a huge economic potential by in terms of contributing to GDP, data protection of such digital infrastructure is very, very important. Moving forward, we can actually see, so moving forward, what are the other needs? What are the other needs apart from you know just a minute. So apart from the digital penetration, apart from growing cyber security threats and the economic implications it's going to have, what are the other needs? Okay, other needs is that there is actually lack of comprehensive legal framework. Okay, so what is a comprehensive legal framework? India actually, lacks, or it actually lacks an updation of the existing laws. Okay, for example, if you see the GDPR actually stands for General Data Protection Regulation. So this is the regulation of EU. Okay, so this is actually a comprehensive framework that actually gives autonomy to the users of the data itself. For example, if it is me, it gives me the authority to control my data, but such infrastructure is actually not legally available in India. So that is what they say, even the existing laws are outdated. So because of this, again, we actually need data protection regime. Also, there is discrimination and marginalization. How? You can actually ask me, how does the data protection have relevance with that in the marginalized section of the population? This is where we will see. There is actually a lot of unprotected data, okay, and people who are not aware of how legally, in order to protect, how legally can their own data be protected. So what happens is that there is misuse of this personal data, specifically the marginalized as well as the vulnerable groups. Now we will actually see examples for this. Okay, first example is the Compass algorithm bias in the US. So what is this Compass algorithm bias in the US? This Compass is nothing but it is a system that is used in the US, that is United States, for judicial risk assessments. Okay, that is in order to actually have a survey, or to actually have a fair idea of who are all the people who can potentially commit a crime in the future based on their previous reports. Okay, or their crime records. So that is what it is. But what happens, since there was unregulated data and there was unprotected data everywhere, this actually disproportionately classified the African American descendants. It actually said that the African Americans are those who are or who can actually cause a potential or commit a potential crime in the future when compared to that of the white Americans. Okay, so this was actually affecting the marginalized communities, the minorities. Okay, so and the marginalized and the vulnerable sections. So this is why the data again has to be protected. Again, if you see Cambridge Analytica scandal, this actually happened in 2018, where personal data of millions of Facebook users were actually seen in order to trace your kind of voter behavior, to see the kind of religion, or to see the religious or the political propaganda that a particular section actually likes. So based on that, what happens, they will start giving those relevant kind of posts, and they will actually give you those kind of advertisements, and this will actually change the voter behavior and entirely disrupts the democratic process. And this has actually happened in countries like US and UK. So again, due to these kind of threats in the society, we need data protection and management. So this is one of the other dimensions. Now let's see what are the frameworks for data protection in India. First one is the right to privacy. So if you see the Justice K.S. Puttaswamy judgment, and this actually came in the year 2017. As per this judgment, the Supreme Court actually said that right to privacy is actually part of or is a fundamental right which is actually under Article 21 of the Constitution. Also, we have other statutory provisions. So this is constitutional provision. The statutory provisions actually involves the Information Technology Act that gives protection and security to your electronic data. Okay, like your sensitive personal data or any kind of information. Moving forward, you have the IT Amendment Act. This one, IT Act of 2008. This actually inserted two sections. Okay, section 43A. This actually creates or imposes liability on any kind of organization. If they actually neglect to protect your data, then what happens? They are liable or answerable. Next one is section 72A. This provides punishment for the disclosure of information or any kind of breach of lawful contracts. Okay, so this is what are the frameworks of this data protection in India. Next one, if you see, it is the IT rules of 2011. This actually provides specific guidelines, okay, on how to keep the or how to go with the process of electronic collection, that is data collection. How do you store them, and how do you actually transfer the sensitive personal data by corporate entities. Next one is the Digital Personal Data Protection Act of 2023. Very, very important, because this the provisions was actually asked in the examination. So this aims for transparency, accountability and ethical use of personal data. So after dealing with this, now let us actually see which are the organizations do the DPDP Act apply to. Okay, so this particular DPDP Act of 2023, this actually applies to the organizations which are both based in India as well as outside India. Okay, based in India is organization that handle the digital personal data, and also the organization based outside India that process the personal data related to the offering goods or services to the individuals in India. For example, if I'm actually purchasing a good, okay, from what to say, any kind of, let's say, Apple, okay, which is located in the US, to whom I need to provide details of my name, my country, and I need to give them the ID proof, right? So all these are the data that I need to furnish. So what kind of data they actually require operating outside India to provide goods to individuals in India. So this DPDP Act actually applies to both of them. Now moving forward, we will actually see what are certain terminologies and definitions. Okay, so this DPDP Act talks about personal data. What is personal data? I told you, any kind of data where an individual can be identified, okay, or in relation to such data. Next one, digital personal data. That means personal data in digital form. Best example is Aadhaar. Next one is data fiduciary. Data fiduciary is a person, or it can be an entity also, who determines the purpose and means of processing the personal data. For example, if you actually take Instagram, so this actually requires your data, right? It actually asks about your gender, your age, your name, etc. Right? So depending on that, what happens? They are actually called as data fiduciary. Moving on, the data principal. This is the individual. If it is me, the person whom the personal data actually relates. Next is the data processor. Any person who actually processes the personal data on behalf of a data fiduciary is called as a data processor. Next one is processing of personal data. This is nothing but it is a totally automated operation or set of operations which is actually performed on digital personal data. So these are the terminologies that are provided as per the Act. Next one, what are the key features of this particular Act? If it is not visible, I will tell you. The Act actually mandates that there has to be a consent, okay? That is explicit consent actually has to be taken from the individual before using or processing the data. Next one, the individuals actually have the rights to access, correct, as well as delete certain data. Next one, in case you don't follow all these things, there are penalties for data breaches and non-compliance. Next one, your rights. What are your rights under the Act? I told you that individuals actually have the right to access the data which is actually held up by the entities or the organization. Next one, there is right to correct any kind of inaccurate or incomplete data. And finally, right to be forgotten. You can even opt for deletion of a particular data from the database. Next one, what are the compliance checklist that has to be followed by the organizations is that there have to be robust data security measures, and also regulate you they have to regularly update the privacy policy and actually have to imbibe the current practices. Next one, they have to conduct the data protection impact assessment for new projects. And also, if you compare this particular act with this general data protection regulation of the EU, that is European Union, both of them actually prioritize the consent and individual rights. The difference is that DPDP is for India and this is for EU, and breach notifications is they actually both of them mandate prompt reporting with certain kind of differences. Now moving forward, if you don't comply, what happens? If the breaches actually include unauthorized access, it can actually include the data theft as well as the data loss. Right. Next one, there are penalties. Up to 4% of the annual revenue of the company will actually be taken away. Okay, or any other specific kind of fines. And remedial steps is that you need to notify the authorities or the affected individuals for the corrective actions. Okay, so similarly, data handling process under this, there has to be proper collection with the proper consent. There has to be consent, which is actually what to say, the individuals have to be informed, okay, on voluntary consent. The processing actually has to be done for specific or intended purposes, that also the person has to know. Next, the storage and the deletion must also be notified to the individual. So these are the other provisions. Now let's see what are the major rules. Okay, what are the draft rules? This actually has been brought under this DPDP Act only. Okay, so these rules are named as DPDP Rules of 2025. It is under this particular DPDP Act. This actually talks about the clear communication by data fiduciaries. So these kind of individuals or the organizations which are going to use our particular data, they have to provide a notification. Okay, they have to provide standalone clear notices about personal data. Next one, to the data principles. You saw what are data principles, right? If I am the individual, then Instagram has to tell me what kind of data it requires from me. Next one, the notice also should include what is the type of data collected, for what purpose it is actually collecting, and what is the method it is actually used for withdrawing, or what are the other processes for withdrawing the consent. Then it has to give you proper security safeguards regarding the breach, etc. Next one, it talks about the breach notification. These Instagram platform, or what to say, any particular platform, have to actually notify the affected individuals in 74 hours of detecting a personal data breach. And also the notification was talk about what is the nature of the breach, the extent to which the breach has done, as well as what is your mitigation measure. Then processing by the state. The state can also process your personal data, okay, and that for what? The benefit transfer. I actually told you, right? Subsidies or disbursing the what to say, grants or anything for a particular scheme, etc. And also the other services, and processing must actually be very, very legal, transparent, and the data minimization principles have to be followed, and retention limits have to be there. That is, data can be retained for a particular period of time, after which it can actually be deleted, or it can also be preserved after taking consent of the particular individual. So these are what the rules actually say. The next one, it also speaks about the protection of children's data. In children's case, what happens is that the consent has actually to be gotten from the parent or the legal guardian of the child. And also there are exemptions specifically with respect to sectors like health, then education, etc. And for safety purposes, under strict conditions have to be there. Next, processing outside India. So, the data transferred outside India must comply with the government specified requirements to ensure protection, and also the dissatisfied individuals can actually file the appeal with the appellate tribunal digitally. So, these are all the draft rules that have actually been brought by the government. So, here I hope you understood yeah, I hope you understood this particular concept of what do you mean by digital or data protection. Okay, why is it actually needed? Because the digital space is infrastructure is growing, so why it is actually needed, and what are all the framework we saw, the IT rules, then we saw the DPDP Act, and then the current rules, etc. And then what are the challenges India faced is what we saw, and finally we saw the global examples also. Right, apart from the EU, you also have good US as well as the China adopted model, which is the homework that you people actually have to do. Search and read on it so that you can actually make a comparison as well as contrast between how it differs from that of India's DPDP Act or the regulation framework. Now, let's move forward and quickly take up the second topic, that is water woes. So here we are actually going to talk about the groundwater depletion and its status in India, and what has specifically been the nitrate contamination. And apart from nitrate contamination, are there other materials or metals or toxins that are present there? Yes, of course, fluoride as well as uranium are actually present in excessive content. And moving from that, you also have the blue baby syndrome, and this is actually, this occurs because of what and all that becomes very, very important. So here it is important from general science, and for mains it's under GS paper 3 science and technology, and also comes under geography, environment, pollution and degradation, and GS paper 1 resources. So here there has been a previous year question, if you actually see. Apart from this H1N1 virus, since it's blue baby syndrome, we have connected to the H1N1 virus, blue baby syndrome. And also there has been a question, what has been the state of groundwater in the Gangetic plains? Okay, so there also you need to actually know about what is the status of groundwater, and how it is actually preserved in India, and which region actually consumes or is responsible for the maximum depletion of groundwater, because of which we have excessive contamination of nitrates, then fluorides, uranium, etc. So here in that light, this particular topic becomes very important, and here now we will see why this particular article has been in news. So the Central Groundwater Board has given an annual assessment, and this has revealed that India's water crisis or groundwater crisis is intensifying, specifically with increased presence of nitrate levels that is posing both the health as well as environmental risks. That let us actually see how. Okay. So moving forward, Key observations of the report. There have been rising nitrate levels in groundwater. That is, if you see the districts with excessive nitrate levels, that is, they actually have something greater than 45 milligram per liter. So, what is this 45? It is the Bureau of Indian Standards maximum amount of nitrate that actually has to be present in groundwater. That is 45. If you see the WHO standard, it is 50 milligram per liter. So this has actually been exceeded by many of the districts. Okay, the number of districts were earlier 359 in 2017, but now it has actually jumped to 440 in 2023. And also this is actually causing health risks, that is the blue baby syndrome, which is called as methemoglobinemia. What do you mean by methemoglobinemia? Your hemoglobin in the blood, that is the RBCs, they actually will be unable to attach themselves to oxygen. That is nothing but, in simple words, your RBCs won't be able to carry the oxygen to the other tissues or other parts of the body. So that is called as the methemoglobinemia, that actually results in patches of blue coloration, specifically in infants, that is just born babies. So that is called as the blue baby syndrome. This is the health risk. And if you see the environmental risk, what happens due to excessive runoff either from the agriculture sources or from the acid rain, the natural atmospheric processes, then animal manure, again the runoff, then we have the sewage and the septic waste again released into the water bodies. And then if you see the nitrogen based fertilizers that are actually used and the agricultural runoff, all this will actually result in the accumulation of nutrients, or specifically in this case nitrates, in the surface water. So when this actually increases, what happens? That increases the amount of, or the growth of, the producers. So these producers are nothing but algae. Okay, so growth of algae, and that is called as algal bloom, or in other words it's called as eutrophication. So this is actually going to create algal blooms, and this actually harms the adequate ecosystem, because it's actually going to deplete the ocean with what? By taking away the oxygen and suffocating the aquatic life. So this is also the reason because of which the other aquatic beings are also affected. Next one, the geographical trends in nitrogen contamination. If you see states with highest contamination, first tops the Rajasthan with 49%, followed by Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. Also perennial nitrate problems, that is throughout, continuously. Which are the regions that have? Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh as well as Gujarat, due to geological factors. What are geological factors? These are actually semi-arid regions, right? So what happens? They actually have huge deposits of these nitrates, and this, when it actually rains or something, it dissolves. Okay, and when it dissolves, it actually reaches the groundwater table and again causes the presence of nitrates in the groundwater. Next one, emerging hot spots include the central as well as southern India, where there are actually practices of intensive agriculture, where excessive manure or pesticides or fertilizers is used, and human activity. Now, let us actually move forward to see the further observations. Okay, so we are done with the observations. Now, if you look at this picture of this beautiful baby, very sadly, the baby actually has spots of blue, right? So, this is actually called as the blue baby syndrome. So, methemoglobinemia, that is, it is the blood's or the decreased or blood's ability to carry oxygen is reduced, so that there is oxygen deficiency in various parts of the body, and it primarily affects the skin to appear in bluish. This is also called as cyanosis. Since it's blue in color, it is called as blue baby syndrome. That is because of high nitrate levels in water contamination, because of agriculture runoff, the waste of sewage and septic tanks, etc. And moving forward, you can also see by consumption of vegetables which are high in nitrates, okay, which are grown in nitrate rich soil. So they will also, possibly have nitrate contamination or concentration, also chemical exposure. Next one, these are apart from these anthropological factors, there are also heredity factors like the genetic conditions affecting hemoglobin conversion. This can also lead to congenital methemoglobinemia. Also, what are the symptoms? There are bluish discoloration in the skin and the lips, which is a condition called as the cyanosis, and followed by that there is fatigue and there is irritability, there is difficulty in breathing, and also in severe cases it can lead to the developmental delays or it can be fatal, that is it can cause death. Next, what are the health risks for adults? This actually causes headache, some kind of dizziness, and the increased risk of gastric cancer due to the formation of nitrosamines. Next one, what are the preventions? You need to have proper water treatment methods, that is reverse osmosis, that is the RO, in order to filter, okay, and then you have the ion exchange and distillation processes and all to remove the excess nitrates from drinking water. Next one, you need to minimize the use of nitrate based fertilizers in agriculture. Then you need to adopt sustainable farming techniques to reduce the nitrate leaching into the groundwater. Okay, now moving forward, next news. So the third article for the day is Ministry monitors HMPV outbreak. See, this is a very simple article only where we will be talking about this metapneumovirus. So this is the topic that we'll be discussing about. So China has actually seen an outbreak of this human metapneumovirus after 4 years of COVID. So COVID had actually come around 2019-20, right? After that, right now, it has actually seen this particular outbreak of this particular flu. And this is important from GS paper 2, issues relating to development and management or services relating to health. That is how our health infrastructure, whether it is prepared or not in order to meet such a, epidemic or, this flu or what. This is what we are going to see. Now moving forward, diseases, it actually becomes very, very important once you had a question on Zika. So similarly, this particular viral infection is also important. So China is experiencing a surge in the human metapneumovirus cases 5 years after the COVID-19 pandemic, right? So now moving forward, let us see what is this particular HMPV. So HMPV is what? It is the human metapneumovirus and it actually belongs to the family that is Pneumoviridae family, and it is closely related to the respiratory syncytial virus, and this is however not important. So here this has actually been, it was discovered in the year 2001 in Netherlands as a significant cause of respiratory infections, okay, in 2001, and the risk groups were particularly children under the age of 14 and in other older adults who actually have a weakened immune system. So it was affecting them. The treatment is, so far there is no particular antiviral treatment available, and this is managed with the supportive care, that is keeping the patient or the person who is affected with it with maximum hydration, that is amount of water you consume, as well as constant supply or continuous monitoring of the oxygen. Okay, so that is oxygen therapy. Now moving forward, the transmission. You know that any kind of flu, even common cold, is actually caught via cough and sneezing, where your secretions from coughing or sneezing affects the other person, or close contact when you're touching and shaking hands with them. Okay, that is what, when you are intimate or in close proximity to the person who's affected, and also by coming in contact with the contaminated surface, okay, by which is called followed by contact with the mouth, the nose or the eyes. So these are very, very important to know whether it is a zoonotic order disorder or whether it is actually transferred from human to human. How it is done, this is important. Common symptoms include your cough, fever, nasal congestion as well as shortness of breath, and there are severe complications also lead to bronchitis as well as pneumonia. The incubation period, what do you mean by incubation period? It is actually the period between which the time, that is the time you come in contact with the infection to the time it goes to the immune system and it is actually manifested or it comes out as this particular cold. So the period that is called as incubation period, that is in 3 to 6 days it happens, and duration on illness actually depends on the severity. So this is what is the HMPV. Now let's move to India's response. So all the monitoring of these kind of diseases and what are I mean the other seasonal influenza cases in India. India is actually trying to be in contact with the international agencies and to regulate it. Okay, so here it is done by NCDC. So what is this NCDC is what is important. Okay, so NCDC is nothing but the National Center for Disease Control. So this was actually established in 1909 as the Central Malaria Bureau in Himachal Pradesh, okay, at Kasoli. And this eventually evolved into the National Institute of Communicable Disease, and this was in 1963, and then it was renamed as National Center for Disease Control in 2009, and it expanded its mandate to include all the other emerging diseases. If you see, it is headquartered in New Delhi, and what is the nodal agency? It works under the Director General of health services, which is part of Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. And if you see surveillance and control, it is a nodal agency for disease surveillance and also facilitates the prevention and control of all the communicable diseases, and also combats any kind of antimicrobial resistance cases which are actually becoming increasing across the world. Okay, where your medicines, where your virus, all these are actually become resistant to the the viruses, that is the pathogens actually are becoming resistant to the medicines, okay, due to excessive use of antibiotics. So this is what is called as antimicrobial resistance. Okay, so all this is actually taken care of by this NCDC, National Center for Disease Control. Now let us actually do the final article, that is India Cross-Border Insolvency and Legal Reform. So before moving into the topic, I need to actually ask you, what is the difference between insolvency and bankruptcy? What do you mean by insolvency and bankruptcy? Insolvency is nothing but you actually are unable to repay your loans or your debts. Okay, so this is actually called as insolvency, when that necessitates the intervention of an entity like the court in order to liquidate your assets, in order to take away the assets from you, all these things, that is called as bankruptcy. So here we will be discussing about what is the concept of cross-border insolvency, which is important for both prelims as well as the mains examination, where we'll be discussing about effects of liberalization on the economy. Because why this cross-border insolvency happened? Only because India actually moved from a closed economy to an open one, right? Where we actually opened up our market, there was cross-border flow of trade and other economic transactions, because of which there is greater insolvency and bankruptcy. So this is the part of effect of liberalization in the economy, and also changes in industrial policy and their effects on industrial growth. So here we'll actually move forward and we will look at the previous year question. So there was a question on the term scheme for sustainable structuring of stressed assets. So what do you mean by insolvency? What do you mean by the stressed assets? What do you mean by bad banks? What are bad loans? What has been the NPA of India? All this actually becomes very, very important for the examination. So in that light, this particular topic is important. Now, if you actually see why this particular article is in news, the cross-border insolvency has actually become a critical issue due to the growth of international trade and globalization. We already saw that, right? However, in order to face this, India's current legal framework is actually insufficient, okay, with a lot of complexities of such cases. So this is what we'll actually see here. Now, let us see what is cross-border insolvency. Insolvency, I told you what is the meaning. You're not able to pay back your debts, right? And bankruptcy, you have the interventions of these institutions in order to take away your assets, okay, as a compensation for your payoff. Next one, what is cross-border? When these cases, apart from being involved only within India, these actually involve multiple jurisdictions, that is assets which are located in different countries, that is debtors or creditors who are actually spread across the borders. And next one, we actually have proceedings which are initiated in one jurisdiction impacting the others. Okay, if I have actually defaulted in the US, any kind of their proceedings on me, whether that will lead to the confiscation of my assets over here in India. So again, that depends on the legality and the framework that India actually has, right? So the proceedings initiated in one jurisdiction, how it's going to impact the other. So all this is actually is a part of cross-border insolvency. Now let's see what have been the legal frameworks to deal with insolvency since the colonial times. First, we had the Indian Insolvency Act of 1848. Okay, so this was the first ever insolvency law under the British Raj. So this was under the British Raj in order to address any kind of economic failure domestically. That is why they came out with Indian Insolvency Act. Next, then there was Presidency Towns Insolvency Act of 1909. So this particularly applied to presidencies or the cities like Calcutta, then you have Bombay as well as Madras. And then you had Provincial Insolvency Act of 1920. So this actually takes care of the insolvency in the mafsal areas, that is the rural areas. Next one, what were the key limitations of all these laws or the legal framework? These actually focused only on domestic insolvencies and did not address the cross-border insolvency. So this was actually a critical gap in these laws. Okay, so Indian laws in that case actually had a big gap. Next one, post independence, what happened was that, so pre 1990 stagnation, what happened, despite the economic challenges, the insolvency laws actually were not changed until 1990. In 1990, what happened? There was actually opening up of the Indian market. That is, we had the LPG reforms, that is liberalization. Then you have the privatization and globalization. And you know, globalization has increased the international trade, and this actually highlighted that there are inadequacies in India's insolvency laws, and there were a number of committees that were actually formed in order to modernize these particular insolvency law and to address this issue of cross-border insolvency. Let's actually see what are the committees as well as their recommendations. Okay, so the first one was the Iradi Committee in the year 2000. This actually advocated a unified insolvency code. It actually recommended adopting the UNCITRAL model law. So what do you mean by this? This is nothing but, it actually stands for UN Commission on International Trade Law. International Trade Law, and it came in 1997. So this is actually called as UN Commission on International Trade Law. So this actually recommended, this committee recommended adopting this particular model law on cross-border insolvency. Next one, there was this Mitra Committee 2001. It focused on simplifying the procedures for economic growth. Next, we have the Irani Committee that actually said we need a robust insolvency law in order to support India's growing corporate sector. Then finally, there was this Bankruptcy Law Committee which came up in 2015, and that drafted the Insolvency and the Bankruptcy Code of 2016, which actually mentioned that there has to be time bound, there has to be unified framework for resolving these insolvency cases. Okay. Now, let us actually see so let us actually see the committees and the reforms. These reforms are done. Now we will see what is this UNCITRAL model law. That stands for United Nations Commission on International Trade Law. It is to provide standardized framework for handling these insolvency cases, that is cross-border, and it is adopted by over 50 countries including the US, UK and Singapore. Okay, one of the powerful economies. Next, the core principles is you need to facilitate access to local courts as well as foreign representatives. There have to be recognition of foreign proceedings, and there has to be judicial cooperation and coordination between the jurisdictions. That is, two different countries actually have to have the reciprocity in order to help each other to solve these cases. The benefits, it enhances the legal certainty. Okay, so people will not be you know, very scared to start a business abroad as well as over here. Next one, it protects the creditor rights and also promotes the efficient asset recovery and reduces the conflict between the nations. So this is what is this particular model, and that is what the Iradi committee said. Okay, now you actually have to adopt this UNCITRAL. Okay. Now, what are the key provisions of Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code of 2016? So, this actually introduced, or it had two sections, that is section 234, where, as I told you, India has to enter into reciprocal agreements with the foreign countries in order to resolve the problem, but it is yet to be operationalized because of the absence of agreements. And also it had section 235. This actually enables the tribunals that deals with Indian insolvency to actually take assistance from the foreign courts through letters of request, and this also remains legally unenforceable because of there's a lack or gap in the central government notification. So if you see over here, what is this Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code of 2016? In order to speed up the resolution of stressed assets in the country. And who it is applicable to? The individuals. It is applicable to the partnerships, okay, as well as the corporates. Next one, here when here the authority can actually decide the insolvency application within 180 days, and from which 90 days extension is actually allowed. And when is that? Here, fast track process of 90 days is available for specific entities. And finally, if you see how, here you have the adjudicating authority, that is the National Companies Law Tribunal, that is NCLT, who is responsible for taking up this cases. For the corporates and for individuals, you have the DRT, that is your Debt Recovery Tribunal. So these are the provisions and why was actually the IBC introduced in 2016 in India. Now moving forward, there are certain Supreme Court cases and judicial insights. If you see Jet Airways versus State Bank of India 2019, the NCLT, that is the National Companies Law Tribunal, this actually said there is absence of reciprocal arrangements, okay, and non-notification of this IBC. And this actually showcased that the Supreme Court said that now you need to take care of this, or you need to bring into consideration this UNCITRAL, that is UN Citral law. Next, in the NCLAT ruling, what happened? The Supreme Court actually introduced a cross-border insolvency protocol, and this was actually a temporary mechanism for solving the international insolvency problems. Next one, the limitations is that since the judiciary actually had to intervene, it actually increased the judicial burden and it reduced the debtor asset value due to delays. Okay, so do you understand? So this is what is the insolvency or cross-border insolvency issue. Now let's quickly solve the mains practice question. So this practice question is with respect to that of evolution of data protection in India and till this Data Protection Act of 2023, how it has actually been, and how do these particular frameworks balance privacy, security and economic growth. So again, we've actually broken this down into three parts. Introduction, where you will be speaking about the evolution of the data protection and how it has actually culminated eventually in this Digital Data Protection Act of 2023, aiming to balance these tenets of privacy, security as well as economic growth. And in the body, you will be discussing about the the IT Act of 2000, how it got amended in 2008 and how the rules actually came out in 2011. And then we'll be talking about the judicial pronouncements where the Supreme Court in Puttaswamy case had actually declared that right to privacy is a part of fundamental rights under Article 21. Then we'll be discussing about the emergence of this Data Protection Act of 2023 and the particular provisions there we saw, and the balancing aspects which actually ensures the privacy, and then it also maintains the security measures, etc. Now moving forward, there has been a conclusion where we have to say that the DP Act, it actually strikes a balance between ensuring privacy, security, etc., and with also the challenges in compliance as well as enforcement remaining. So government actually has to work. So that is why they've actually come up with the rules for public feedback. So that actually will enhance this particular privacy matter. So now moving forward, let us quickly solve the prelims questions that was actually taken up by Yogesh sir yesterday. So the first question, with reference to the Panama Canal, consider the following. The Panama Canal, any kind of, the canal, the straits, the gulfs, etc. What are the two regions it actually connects? Whether it is the two continents or between the two oceans, that becomes very, very important. And the surrounding areas around it. First of all, what is a canal and isthmus, strait, etc. All these definitions we need to know. So, the Panama Canal connects the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. Yes, correct. So, this is why your maps actually become very, very important. Next one, Panama is located on the Isthmus of Panama, connecting the North and South America. Yes, it connects North America and South America. Okay, so North as well as South. Yes, this is also correct. The construction of Panama Canal was completed by Panama in 2014. Is this right? No, this is not right. The construction of the Panama Canal was completed in 1914 and it was completed by the US and not Panama. Okay, so since only statements 1 and 2 are correct, your correct answer will be option A. Now moving forward, the second question. With reference to Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index, that is PMI, consider the following statements. PMI for India is released by Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. No, it is released by S&P Global, okay, which actually deals with all these analytics and data. So this is wrong. So a PMI of 0 indicates a contraction of business activity and 100 represents the maximum. Yes. 0, that is anything below 50. So it has a range of 0 to 100, where anything below 50, it actually means the business activity is contracted or not in good shape. Whereas anything above 50, it means that the economic activity of a particular business is expanding. So this is actually correct. And new orders have the least weightage in the calculation of PMI and employment has the highest. See here, weightage of certain parameters become very, very important in these kind of indices. So new orders have the least weightage. No, new orders actually have the maximum weightage of 30%. Whereas the least weightage is what? Calculation, and employment has the highest. No, employment actually has a percentage of 20%. Okay, so this is what it is. And what is the least? It is actually about the stock of goods or material. So this actually has the least of 10%. So this is also wrong. So only since statement 2 is actually correct, it is only statement 2. Here in these options, we've actually made a slight mistake. So only option 2, that is statement 2 is correct over here. Okay. Now moving on to the next question. Which of the following with respect to wholesale price index WPI and producers price index are correct? So the WPI tracks the prices of goods sold at retail level, including both goods and services. Here it is not retail level first of all, it is the wholesale level. And also it actually does not include both goods and services, it includes only goods. So the first statement is wrong. The second one is the Producer's price index. It includes both the goods and services and tracks the price movements on all stages of production from raw materials to finished goods. Yes, this is correct. So only since statement 2 is correct, only B is correct. So your correct answer will be option B. Now let's actually move forward to see the questions that have actually been prepared for today, which will be taken up in your successive or the next class. Okay. So blue baby syndrome is caused by contamination of water with which one of the following? Similarly, arsenic contamination, all these actually result in which of the following? That also becomes important. So here we know whether it is nitrite or nitrate, we need to know properly. Now moving forward, next one is through HMPV. Okay, HMPV, how it is spread, and it was first identified as a part of Pneumoviridae family, and it is closely related to which of the viral species? This is also important. So for solving this and for knowing where you actually stand in understanding this particular lecture, we actually request you to solve these questions on our website. Okay, that is the Narayana IAS Academy website, the Navigator website, where you can actually solve these questions, which are very well given here in the comment section below. So please do solve it and the answers will be discussed later on. So here With cross-border insolvency, the next question talks about the UN Central Model and also sections 234 and 235 of the IBC, whether they are fully operational to address this cross-border insolvency cases or not. This is something what we recently discussed. Okay, so you can actually discuss these particular answers, or you can actually attempt these MCQs directly at our website. So with this, we've actually come to the end of our daily news analysis session for today. So here, for more such live as well as interactive sessions, please do like, share and subscribe to Narayana IAS Academy YouTube channel. We'll meet you soon. Have a good day.